part two, Howard was out for a long time, and he was all by himself. And we knew he was getting syndicated all over the country because he would talk about the different syndicated markets he went into. And he was always talking about all the bad DJs out there that just were copying his stuff from the beginning. It was kind of funny at this point because FM was full strong and NBC and AM was pretty much off the planet. Nobody really cared about them except for Republican talk for the most part. And it was fun to listen to them. And then Opie Anthony came. And they were New Yorkers definitely, and you knew that they knew of Howard Stern, and they definitely did not hide they knew of Howard Stern. I mean, in the years to follow with them, you started to realize that they were their own people, and they were funnier and better than Howard Stern, in my opinion, not everybody's opinion. And it was hard at first because, you wanted to be loyal to Howard Stern. He gave you so much entertainment. But after a while, it just started about him complaining about his staff and women. And women are great, except for when you can't really see them. And then, even though he had a show for a while on a regular channel, it was always blocked. So it's just like, I could just see him with clothes. What's the difference? I'm not seeing them naked. Only Howard Stern would see them naked, and we'd see bars. So anyway, Opie Anthony came into the thing, and it became big. And talk started to pick up, because now we had Howard Stern in the morning on 92.3, and we had Opie and Anthony in the afternoon at 102.7. Eventually, 102.7 went all talk. And that was the day at first I was actually really upset about it because it was just at that time that WNW was actually playing some of the best music they have played in years, even though they've been a rock station for, I don't know, forever. But now they had talk during the whole thing, and it was tough. But there were a lot of good shows on. It's still, in the morning, they had this two-couple thing that nobody really cared about, and I don't think anybody listened to it, because most people were listening to Howard Stern in the morning, let's face it. But then, at 10 o'clock, they had the Radio Chick, which was a decent show. Oh, I thought so. I enjoyed all the shows. I didn't care what show. I started not to care what show to listen to. I just wanted to listen to something talk and funny, and it would keep my day going. And I had the type of job that I was able to listen to it during the day. It was very, it was just a lot more fun. Let me switch the thing. And then Opie and Anthony come on the afternoon, and then they had Steve Likas or whatever his name is. He's the guy who was in California for the longest time, and supposedly he did good ratings there. Hey, who am I to say? And then they had RonandFez.net on after Likas, and they were a good show. They were fun. They were different. They weren't quite the shock jock-ish type thing. They would just kind of talk about things that we just all talk about at one time or another, or a lot of nerds talk about, and I guess I'm one of them too. And then, but it started very uneasy because Howard obviously didn't want Opie and Anthony never to mention him, and supposedly made them not get him to mention him, which is fine. But it was you kind of knew that they were coming up, and then they started getting syndicated all over the place. And then, but the sad part is, New York radio's, the start of the downfall, is that Opie and Anthony didn't like half the shows that were on their station, and they weren't getting any ratings. And I know they were trying to fight for their ratings, and they were pretty much the only show that had the ratings on 102.7. So they fought with everybody, like the Radio Chick, and they didn't like Steve Likas or whatever his name is at all. And his show was a little, I don't know, I guess it was okay. It was definitely a guy show, but it was just kind of just him, and it was kind of boring. Opie and Anthony was better already because they took their friends and they had fun and comedians, and everybody was having a good time, and you knew they were just allowed to do whatever they wanted. It wasn't as controlled. Howard Stern was all controlled. Of course, Opie and Anthony did their craziness too. And it was great. That part of I thought it was great. They switched the channels a couple of times. They thought, eventually they took a team from Washington, D.C. called Don and Mike, and they put them on after in the Steve Likas spot as a rebroadcast. And that rebroadcast, I liked that show. Again, though, Opie and Anthony had a problem with them. So they started fighting with them. So the people of Opie and Anthony didn't want to listen to any of the other shows because they didn't like them. The only show that they were allowed to listen to by the Opie and Anthony thing, and allowed might be a strong word, it was the Ron and Fez show. So that show kept going at night. It was a good time at night. And then Don and Mike was on, and then people were like, well, Don and Mike was from Washington D.C. Supposedly they were all over a bunch of different markets, just never in New York before, and their ratings sucked, just like all the ratings. The only ratings that were any good was Opie and Anthony, and then of course Howard Stern in the morning. Now, mind you, it's two radio stations in New York that do this. So once Howard was off air, that was just rock music and like alternative and all that good metal stuff and rock stuff and grunge and whatever else they wanted to play. And then you could switch around and hopefully you went to 102.7 eventually, if not at least by the time you get Opie and Anthony. Now, of course, the big problem is that eventually Opie and Anthony will destroy themselves. And then the whole world of New York radio goes into a tither. And that'll be part 3.